It all started on an ordinary morning at the airport, just another crowded terminal, passengers rushing to catch their flights, and the usual announcements echoing overhead. But what happened next would leave everyone stunned. A seasoned pilot, known for his no-nonsense attitude and short temper, found himself caught in a situation he never expected. In a heated moment, with tempers flaring and patience wearing thin, he lashed out, raising his hand in frustration toward a passenger he assumed was just another traveler causing trouble. What he didn't know, however, was that the woman standing calmly in front of him wasn't just any passenger. She was the chief of police, off-duty, dressed down, and flying under the radar. The look in her eyes wasn't fear, it wasn't shock. It was controlled strength. She didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten. But what came next left the entire terminal in silence. Witnesses couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some pulled out their phones, others froze in place. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. This was a moment that would turn into a lesson he'd never forget. How did it escalate so quickly? What was said in those few seconds that pushed things over the edge? And most of all, how did the pilot react when he found out who she really was? Let's just say, regret came fast, and so did consequences. Stay with us, because this story is about to take a turn no one saw coming. Earlier that day, Chief Angela Reynolds had just wrapped up a week-long national law enforcement conference in D.C. Known for her calm authority and sharp instincts, she preferred to travel quietly. No badge on display, no uniform, no entourage. She believed respect should be earned, not demanded. Wearing jeans, a hoodie, and a baseball cap, she looked like any other traveler navigating a busy airport. Her plan was simple: grab a coffee, board her flight, and be home in time for dinner with her daughter. Captain Blake, the pilot in question, was in a different headspace altogether. Behind on schedule and under pressure from multiple delays, he was already frustrated. A miscommunication at the gate, a last-minute crew change, and a small disagreement with ground staff had set him off edge. So when he saw a woman speaking assertively to a flight attendant near the boarding area, he assumed she was giving the staff a hard time. He marched over, interrupting the conversation mid-sentence. Passengers nearby paused and glanced over as his voice rose. "You think you can talk to my crew like that?" he snapped. Angela, cool and collected, explained there had been an issue with her seat assignment. No attitude, just facts. But he wasn't listening. His tone grew sharper. Tension rose. Then came the moment that turned everything. A quick, dismissive gesture, a hand raised not to strike, but in a way that crossed the line. People gasped. Angela stepped back, her expression unreadable. No one knew who she was. Not yet. But someone was recording. And the situation was about to spiral into something much bigger than a misunderstanding at the gate. Because in less than 10 minutes, the man who thought he had control would realize he never did. The moment hung in the air like a held breath. Angela didn't move. She didn't need to. The raised hand, the sharp words, the public embarrassment. It was all too much for people watching, but not for her. She'd been through worse. What Captain Blake didn't know was that Angela had spent most of her career staying calm under pressure, diffusing situations far more dangerous than this. But right now, she was more focused on how quickly things had escalated and how everyone seemed to assume she was in the wrong. A flight attendant stepped in, trying to smooth things over, whispering to the captain, glancing nervously between him and Angela. The staff didn't recognize her either, not yet, but a few passengers started murmuring. One woman whispered, "She handled that better than anyone I've seen," while a man nearby checked the recording on his phone. Word was already spreading across the terminal. Angela calmly requested to speak with a supervisor. Her voice was steady, low, not giving in to emotion. Meanwhile, Blake stood stiffly, arms crossed, still convinced he had just handled an entitled traveler. He didn't see the bigger picture forming around him. He didn't see the eyes watching, the phone's recording, or the subtle shift in energy as airport security approached, not for Angela, but to ask what had just happened. Behind the scenes, Another layer began to unfold. One of the airport employees recognized Angela from a seminar on de-escalation and leadership. She quickly stepped away to make a call, to her manager and then to someone higher up. In minutes, what had started as a personal misunderstanding was turning into an internal crisis. The airline's legal team was alerted. Senior staff began scanning security footage. Captain Blake had no idea what storm he had just walked into. Within half an hour, the energy in the terminal had completely shifted. What was once a routine boarding process had turned into a quiet storm of whispers, stares, and growing curiosity. Passengers who hadn't seen the incident were now asking questions. Airport staff moved with nervous urgency, whispering into radios and glancing over at Angela, who remained calm, seated near the boarding gate, scrolling on her phone as if nothing had happened. But every movement she made was measured. She was waiting for what? No one knew yet. Captain Blake, still unaware of the full weight of the situation, stood with another flight crew member behind the counter, trying to justify his actions. "She got loud with my team," he insisted. "I stepped in. That's what I'm supposed to do." But the expressions on the faces of those listening told a different story. A supervisor tried to hide her concern as she nodded slowly, then stepped away to take another call, this time from someone even higher in the chain of command. Meanwhile, security footage from multiple angles was being reviewed. The video recorded by the passenger had already reached someone in media relations at the airline. The timestamp matched. The audio was clear. And more than anything, the clip was damning, not because of what Angela did, but because of how little she did, and how much the captain did in contrast. As tension rose, a black SUV pulled up outside the terminal's restricted entrance. Two plainclothes officers stepped out. They weren't here to arrest anyone, but they had come for someone important. Inside, a young intern rushed into the operations room, holding a printed profile in his hand. "You're not going to believe who she is," he said. And just like that, everything shifted, but it still wasn't over, not even close. As the plainclothes officers entered the terminal, they didn't walk with urgency, but with intention. One of them nodded discreetly at Angela, who gave a slight nod back. It was clear they weren't strangers. The people watching still didn't know who she was, but something about that silent exchange told them she wasn't just another passenger. The atmosphere grew heavier. The captain, finally noticing the shift, squinted toward the scene, his confident posture starting to falter. Just as the airline's regional manager arrived and was briefed, another piece of the puzzle dropped, and this time, it changed everything. The intern who had delivered Angela's profile had also dug deeper. Not only was Angela Reynolds the chief of police from one of the largest metropolitan cities in the country, but she was also recently nominated for a federal oversight role in aviation security. That meant her presence here wasn't just casual, it was likely tied to an undercover inspection. And if that was true, this wasn't just a PR nightmare. It could turn into a federal investigation. But before anyone could act, another twist landed. The passenger who had recorded the incident stepped forward, not to share the video, but to reveal something else. He was a journalist, traveling anonymously to report on airport safety procedures after a series of whistleblower tips. And guess what? This terminal had already been flagged in his notes for previous crew behavior complaints, some involving the very same captain. Now, the layers were stacking up fast. An off-duty police chief involved in a confrontation, a pilot with a history of issues, a journalist with evidence, and all of it unfolding in a very public space, with eyes watching from every angle. The question wasn't just what would happen next, it was how far this would go. And who else knew the truth? The regional manager finally approached Angela, now flanked quietly by the two plainclothes officers. "Chief Reynolds," he said, his voice low and respectful, "we deeply regret what happened today." Around them, the buzz of the terminal softened. Even those who didn't know the full story could feel something big had just shifted. Angela stood up slowly, locking eyes with Captain Blake, who had gone noticeably pale. He started to speak, stammering something about misunderstanding, But Angela raised her hand, not to accuse, just to pause him. "This isn't about me," she said clearly. "It's about a system that allows people in power to act without thinking, without listening, and without accountability." Her voice carried just enough to be heard by the growing circle around them. "Today you acted out of ego, not duty." Then came the final blow. The regional manager pulled Captain Blake aside and handed him a tablet. On the screen was the recorded footage, multiple angles, synced and reviewed. But it wasn't just from the passenger's phone. Internal surveillance had picked up audio, confirming every word. Alongside the video was a file, opened discreetly by one of the officers, a formal complaint history with similar incidents that had never reached upper management. Until now. Captain Blake's expression collapsed. He realized this wasn't just about disciplinary action. This was about his entire career. But just as things seemed to settle, the twist came. Angela turned to the journalist, who had been quietly watching nearby. "You might want to check the gate roster," she said with a slight smile. "You're not the only one who came here undercover." The reporter blinked, confused. She walked past him, speaking just loud enough. "Let's just say, you weren't the only one investigating this terminal." And with that, she walked toward her gate, seat reassigned, no escort needed, tension left behind. But the real story was only just beginning. By the time Angela's flight took off, the airport terminal had returned to its usual rhythm. People coming and going, announcements echoing, travelers driving carry-ons past blinking monitors. But the people who witnessed what happened that day wouldn't forget it anytime soon. Neither would the airline. Within 24 hours, the company released a statement addressing the incident, confirming that an internal investigation was underway and that Captain Blake had been placed on administrative leave pending review. Behind the scenes, deeper audits began, not just on personnel but on protocols, complaints that had been overlooked, and a culture that had let behavior like this slip through. The journalist, now fully aware of who Angela was, ran his story a week later. It wasn't just about a confrontation at the gate. It was about accountability, leadership, and the power of staying calm when it matters most. The headline didn't mention her title. It simply read, Asterisk, the woman who taught the airport a lesson without saying a word. Asterisk. Angela's nomination for the federal aviation role was confirmed shortly after. Her quiet strength, already well known in law enforcement circles, had now left its mark in an entirely different space. But she never spoke publicly about the incident. For her, the lesson had already been delivered. Back at the same airport, weeks later, a new sign was posted near the boarding gates. Asterisk, every passenger deserves respect. Titles don't matter, but how we treat each other does. Asterisk. In the end, it wasn't just about a pilot or a police chief. It was about a moment, caught on camera, felt by dozens, and shared across the country, that reminded everyone watching. Respect isn't about power, it's about people. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one you should listen to the most.